Columbia University is the latest to settle with President Trump. The school has agreed to pay $221 million to restore more than $400 million in federal funding cut off by the administration earlier this year. It's the latest in a dispute between the university and the White House over alleged inaction on anti-Semitism, but Trump officials have also signaled more ideological motives.
Both parties are touting the deal as a win, but it doesn't come without some concessions. Columbia has agreed to multiple reforms, including reviewing its Middle East curriculum and asking incoming foreign students why they wish to study in the United States. Trump took to Truth Social to talk about the news, writing, "Numerous other higher education institutions that have hurt so many and been so unfair and unjust and have wrongly spent federal money, much of it from our government, are upcoming. I also want to thank and commend Columbia University for agreeing to do what is right." Education Secretary Linda McMahon touted the deal on Fox News. Let's watch.
This is a monumental victory for conservatives who've wanted to do things on these elite campuses for a long time because we had such far left-leaning, professors, and we had 27% of the students that are coming in, are from outside of the United States. I'm really pleased with this victory. It wouldn't have happened if Donald Trump were not president, and I'm really pleased to execute his vision for this, that our campuses are now, they're what they should be.
Meanwhile, the deal is not a victory to Democrats. New York Representative Jerry Nadler says, quote, "I am deeply disappointed by reports of Columbia University's outrageous and embarrassing $200 million capitulation to the Trump administration's repugnant extortion campaign." He adds, quote, "My alma mater has allowed a once highly respected institution to succumb to the Trump administration's coercive and exploitative tactics. Columbia has effectively waved the white flag of surrender in its battle at the heart of the Trump administration's war on higher education and academic freedom."
This, of course, comes after the recent UPenn settlement, which was over Title IX complaints regarding the participation of transgender men in women's sports, including revoking the titles, the swimming titles from Leah Thomas, who was participating on the women's team. At the time, Education Secretary Linda McMahon told us that this was going to be a roadmap for future settlements and lawsuits against colleges. Columbia, of course, the other sort of hobby horse for the administration after their president was brought in following the anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian protests. So not surprising that they were very high at the list of universities that they wanted to go after.
I think it's good to start from the point of anti-Semitism is real and that there were missteps at Columbia University that I think everyone has acknowledged to make any group, especially Jewish community, feel more comfortable. But across the board, college and university is supposed to be a space where ideas are met and also people don't feel discriminated against. And so that is important. But for me, this period has been so deeply unstable for Columbia University that I don't know that this was like an agreement for President Trump to kind of say, yes, we agree with you, we're going to solve these issues, and more of just like, you are going to deteriorate our college to the point that we can't do research to the level that changes lives if we don't bow down to this. And so there was no other option or way forward. So I think Columbia's president, the acting president, actually did some interviews this week, and she said that, this is not an agreement of extended fault. This is just us trying to continue on and press the reset button and kind of start again. And I think to attach what is described as, quote, woke, which has been grossly misinterpreted, or DEI at the school to this, is just going to create this endless precedent where if President Trump doesn't like what's happening, then he just starts to sue you. And I think there has to be a distinct difference between student protesters using their voice to first of all, if they're hindering or doing anything violent or in a classroom, these are problematic. But if they're just raising their voice, college campuses are built on this kind of thing. And if they're protesting anything that let's say a leader is doing, a political leader like Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, that is what college is all about. They're allowed to say, listen, I'm not anti-Israel, I'm not an anti-Semite because I don't like this leadership and how it's being handled, and I also don't want to see people being killed. That is a fair statement, and I think we have to allow people the opportunity to protest without constantly feeling that now they may need to be silenced. And so I want to make sure that college still becomes free of any type of disdain from students to want to speak up and speak out, because that's where you actually find your voice.
Yeah, no, I support the freedom to protest and freedom to speech, and I would love to see colleges be places of intellectual diversity. Columbia's problem is that they did not do anything about students who were going beyond free speech. and actually making it a hostile environment for Jewish students through the use of these encampments where Jewish students weren't allowed to enter. They blocked their access to the library, to classrooms, and even took over buildings at one point. And Columbia did very little, if anything, to prevent any of that from happening. And that is a violation of federal law, right? We have Title VI, which is civil rights law, which says that you cannot discriminate and receive federal funding. And so Columbia had to give back the federal funding because they knew that they were in violation of Title VI through both this as well as some of the affirmative action policies that they were continuing to implement in both the hiring and admissions process on their campus, similar to what Harvard University was doing as well. Even though this isn't officially an admission of guilt, they say they're not doing that. To me, it's pretty clear that that's what it is. And look, if these colleges want to be able to provide that research, then follow the law. It's really that simple.
And also, I just want to make sure that the interest in protecting the Jewish community is authentic, right? I think a lot of this is just more point proving than actually caring, because when you think about that $200 million that's going to the Treasury Department now, Trump's team was questioned very adamantly this week about where exactly that funding will go, how it will be used, and the answers were very vague with no real specific place. And so if they actually wanted to help, because anti-Semitism is on the rise, why not put it towards something that will help the Jewish community, or suggest programming in our government that will help people that are experiencing anti-Semitism. I don't see that going anywhere outside of just in a blanket statement for Trump to support some other random effort that has nothing to do with the Jewish community. And so I think that that's an important and relevant fact to bring up, that this seems like more retribution than actually real life action to protect the community, just a point to prove to Columbia.
Well, at the same time, though, like, the point should be proven, right? And they should be held accountable for what they did, regardless of what the administration does with that money. That's obviously $200 million that the taxpayers getting back that can help either with cutting the deficit or spending on other government services that would already be appropriated. Columbia doesn't deserve that money if they're not going to abide by discrimination law and civil rights law. And so they should actually have retribution, because they broke the law repeatedly. They failed to protect a specific class of students based on their ethnic background, including in this lawsuit, actually, we saw examples of professors themselves harassing Jewish students and telling them that there was going to be the Intifada and that they were basically stooges for Netanyahu, and making them feel incredibly unsafe in class, which, I mean, that's a person in a position of power, right? And so if Columbia doesn't do anything to stop that from people that they hired, they admitted to their campus, then to me, they absolutely should pay the price.
Well, I think there's a workable solution here, right? Like getting with Columbia and figuring out how to make sure that the curriculum is fair, and especially leadership and teachers jumping into positions where they understand their roles as professors without hindering free speech, but also not discriminating. But I also think when you add the money and suing, that is some of the performative thing, because we want to make sure that policies are instituted across the campus that's receiving federal funds that actually will help and change the lives of these students. And I don't know that combing through DEI or making sure there's no woke policies, quote unquote, is going to change much for the Jewish experience there. But this is something that we'll have to just watch play out and see, because I think a lot of it just sounds good for a re-election campaign for all Republicans, right? This is a winning issue for them to make sure that they're removing all things that Trump said he would remove on the campaign trail. So I'm just trying to make sure that the interest is pure and actually something actually changes at Columbia and doesn't deter people from just speaking up and speaking out.
Yeah, I view it as a carrot and a stick. I mean, included in the reforms are reviewing the curriculum and asking foreign students why they wish to study in the U.S., which seems reasonable to me. And to me, the fine is a way to make sure that they are understanding that if this happens again, there are going to be consequences. We're not going to simply let you skate. This is a real place to hit you where it hurts, so you understand that what you did was wrong and can't happen again, and this is an administration that's going to hold you accountable.
But wasn't the funding cut just that? Like the fact that you've held fundings for this long, you lose amazing researchers, the school that's once viewed as the most prestigious university in the country arguably is having researchers want to leave and go elsewhere because they cannot see their research being followed through and they're threatened. So your whole career and livelihood, which has nothing to do with any of these conversations that President Trump is having with the administration at Columbia, has to do with you actually trying to save lives. They may go somewhere else. They may go international. We want the best and the brightest right here in the U.S., right? So cutting funding was a part of that. You know what I mean? So also them paying, it just feels like an extra, like, okay, now I won this and I can just tout this. And, it's like, who is this benefiting unless I know exactly where that $200 million is going?
Yeah, I mean, the funding freeze was part of it, but you also have the reality that federal funding was being used to discriminate. So that money has to come back to the government. That's part of the law. That's why they're paying the settlement. And if those researchers felt like their work wasn't being valued, then they should blame their administrative leaders for choosing to indulge in the campus craziness of what we saw with these occupations, instead of making sure that first and foremost it was an environment for learning.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with Columbia. I feel like we're going to stay on top of this story because it's not over. Harvard's probably up next. We have a lot more to talk about. Stay with us on Rising.